Product cards are everywhere on the web, but we will make them stand out. We build cards that tilt and come to life in 3D when we hover over them. Plus, we will create them in two modes, black and white. So, for the preparation I have created these files, linked them together. In the CSS file I have imported Poppins font from the Google fonts. We have some reset code, and not to take your time I have created these variables. We have some color variables and one transition variable. We jump over to the HTML file. We create one container. Then I create the first card. Its first content, Nike Air Max. Then we have one button with a class name buy and text buy now. Then we have one circle div, which is obviously the central circle. Then we have image with a class name product. We are not gonna have our images saved in a directory, so I'm gonna paste the URL to our images. This is Nike shoes image from the code pan. For the alternative text, I just type Nike shoes. For each card, we create color variables that we are gonna use in the CSS later. And to create one, we call style attribute dash dash bg color, and then our color. This is green color variable. I copied the cards 2 more times, and for the other cards, I just changed this part of the URL, red, blue, and obviously I have to change the variables also. Red color, and the last variable is gonna be blue color. We will also paste one SVG icon with a class name mode switch, which is gonna be responsible for switching the mode. We come back to the CSS file, call our body tag, make its display flags, it positions its children in the center, justify center, its flags direction is column, its height is the height of the viewport. Background color will equal main BG from the variables. Then we call container. We give it max width of 1200 pixels. Padding 40 pixels from bottom and top and 0 from the sides. It displays flags also. It also aligns its children in the center. Justify content center with a gap of 80 pixels. Flags wrap is gonna equal wrap. This line will allow the cards to wrap on smaller screen devices. And finally, we make its position relative, since some of its content are gonna have absolute positioning. Let's make the images smaller to see the code change better. We call the product, and we give it max width of 300 pixels. Then we write some styles for the card itself. Box, width 300 pixels. Height 400 pixels. We give it border radius of 20 pixels. We make its position relative also. We give it background color, variable, box BG, and then we set its transform style to preserve 3D. We set its transform style property to preserve 3D since some of its content are gonna rise along the z-axis, so we did it to see those transformation effects. Using box before and after pseudo elements, we are gonna create text like Nike and shoes. So let's create the first one. Before, its content is Nike, its position is absolute, top 20 pixels, left 20 pixels, color, variable, card BG text, font size 6em, font weight 900, font style, italic, and we set its opacity to 0 by default, since we want them to appear when we hover over the card. And we give them transition. We use transition variable. I copied one more time for the shoes text. So shoes. This one appears at the bottom right corner. Right. And we make this one smaller. 4.5, and this one is after a pseudo element. As we said, when we hover over the card, then they show up. So when the box is hovered, after, we set their opacity to 0.05. like this. Instead of transition, we wrote transform. Sorry for that. There we go. Now we write some code for the H2 heading. We give it absolute positioning. Top equals 0, left equals 0, text align, center. We give it width of 100%, and its color is gonna equal name color variable. We give it the same transition, and we transform it along the z-axis by 75 pixels. We set its opacity to 0 by default, and when the box is hovered, we move it down by 40 pixels and set its opacity to 1. Everything is working well, except we do not see the text transformation along the z-axis. And that's okay, since we haven't given the card's perspective mode yet, and we will do that in JavaScript. We proceed working on the button by its position is absolute, bottom equals 0, left equals 50%, padding 10 pixels from top and bottom, 25 from the sides, background color equals the variable from the HTML, color equals the variable name color, font size 1 rem, cursor pointer, border none, but border radius equals 30 pixels. We give it a transition of the variable transition. We also transform it along the z-axis by 75 pixels, and by default we set its opacity to 0. But when the box is hovered, we move the button 30 pixels up and make it appear. There we go. Nice. Next we will work on the central circle. Circle, width 200 pixels, height 200 pixels, border radius 50%, position absolute, top 50%, left 50%. We set top and left to 50% to move the circle to the center. Background color, variable BG color. We also give it the same transition we gave to others. We transform it using Translate 3D. It accepts X, Y, and Z. For the X, we give minus 50%. We do the same for the Y to move the circle right in the center, and we set Z to 0 by default. We also decrease the opacity to something 0.5. But when the card is hovered, circle, we keep the circle at the center, but also rise it along the z-axis by 40 pixels, and then increase its opacity to something like 0.7. Great job. Finally, let's fix the images. We gave them the same position, top and left properties we gave the circle. That's because we want them to be on the center right above the circles also. We also want them the same transition and transform them the same way we did the circles. But we will give them shadow effect using filter, drop shadow, 0 for the X, 0 for the Y, 5 pixel of blur radius, and shadow color is gonna be black. And when the box is hovered, we want our product to rise along the z-axis by 100 pixels, and we will also increase the blur radius of the shadow effect. We will also rotate them along the z-axis by minus 50 degrees. There we go. It's time to give tilting effect to the cards. We jump to the HTML. We paste one script, the link to which you will find in the description. It's JavaScript code that does all the calculation to achieve the tilt effect. If you are interested in creating such effect manually, you can watch this tutorial from our channel. Now we jump to the JavaScript. We call vanilla tilt class and its init method that accepts elements and some properties. The elements are the cards, so document query selector all, box, and then we give them properties like max. That defines the maximum angle of rotation, speed. That defines how fast the card tilts reacting to the mouse movement. Scale. We scale it by 10% when we hover over the card. Finally, we give an easing function that sets some easing to the tilt transformation. Now we see the card's elements perfectly in the perspective mode. Now let's work on the mode switch. We jump back to the CSS. We call mode switch. Its fill is white. Its stroke is white also. Stroke width 0.5 pixels. Cursor pointer. Stroke line cap. Rounded. Stroke line join rounded also. And when the mode changes, the theme changes, we'll apply the active class, changing the fill and stroke of the icon to something black. We move up. Have you ever wondered to what element the pseudo class is applied to? Well, it's applied to the highest level element in the DOM hierarchy, and the highest element is HTML. That means these variables by default are applied to the HTML tag. Now I paste another set of variables which are the reverse of these colors, but it's applied to the white class. And using JS, when we will apply this class to the HTML tag, these colors will override these ones, making the theme white. First we get our icon using document query selector, mode, switch. Then we set it an event listener, which is click. And when this icon is clicked, we get the HTML document element. This document element is HTML actually. Class list, toggle, the white class. We do the same for the icon, class list, toggle, active. Let's test it. This is the white mode. And here we have the black mode. This is the end of this tutorial. If you are interested in working with elements in 3D space, then continue watching this tutorial.